Welcome to Belmont Author Spotlight. I'm your host, Anne Marie Mahoney, and it is my pleasure today to have with me author Len Abram. And Len has a collection of his books right in front of him, so we are going to mention all of them, but in particular today, we're going to talk about Killer's App. Len, welcome. Very excited to have you here with us.
Thanks for this opportunity.
Let's just start a little bit with your background. Do you want to tell us about yourself?
Well,
Go ahead.
Yes, I started out to be a teacher. I actually taught junior high at the Mary Curley School in Jamaica Plain.
Oh, right.
And I do remember one of my students there, a tall, black young man named David Pumphrey. I remember his mother coming to me on Parents' Night and saying, "Mr. Abram, you learned my boy." I'll never forgot that. And I think as I collect these people in my imagination, they become the prototypes for characters in my novels. I don't forget many people that I've met. It's one of my joys, actually, enjoying meeting people. And I met David Pumphrey, and I think he became the model for the boy Gabriel in the novel Empty Doorways, which preceded this one.
Yes, yes.
I have my novels here, the 4 that I've written.
Okay.
I never thought when I started out that I'd write 4 books or any book, but I was working at Fidelity Investments, and we came right next door to South Station, which looms large in my books.
Yes, it does.
I love the building, and I worked next to it for 15 or 18 years. And of course, there were a lot of homeless in the building.
Yes.
And that's where I got that theme in my novel of the homeless, what their lives were like. And while I was out there looking at these taxi drivers, whom I got to know as well, I wrote a paragraph about the drivers and South Station, and one of my colleagues turned to me and said, "Why not do something with this?" And that became The Medallion. I wrote that book, yeah.
All right, that was your first.
Right, and the medallion, by the way, is the little plate that goes in the back of taxi cabs, and you have to purchase it or work out some situation with the Hackney division of the Boston, city of Boston. And so the medallion has that purpose. It's a plate, but it resonates. The word medallion resonates. And one of the ideas behind picking a title or an idea in a book is that it resonates like a guitar string resonates. You know, the sound waves keep going out. Well, medallion has it's something precious. And for my taxi driver, it was a precious thing, and he worked hard to get it. And he has a lot of problems acquiring it and keeping it. So that's part of it, yeah. But originally, as I said, I started out to be a teacher, and I taught at 3 universities. I got Northeastern University of Maryland and Temple University in Philadelphia. Okay. And part of that teaching, I worked on my PhD at Maryland. And after I finished my not my dissertation, but my exams, 11 months of exams to get ready to write the dissertation, I had this opportunity to teach overseas with the Armed Forces Education Program. And so I taught in Japan, Korea, Thailand, and Taiwan. And I think that my time teaching in the Armed Forces, all these military people, all the bases I worked at, traveling from place to place, they also emerge in my books and all that experience. And the other night I was watching soldiers in South Korea talking to the new president of the United States, and they were at a camp that I lived at for a while called Camp Humphreys. I know exactly where it is.
All right.
It's next to a town called Pyeongtaek, and it has a designation of being K6.
Okay.
So I do remember all that. So that all came out, and then, lo and behold, there weren't many jobs when I got my PhD finished, and I had to decide on what I was going to do with a career, and I went into technology, and that also is part of my book, Killer's App, because there are characters in it, like Amar Gupta in my story, who are famous for technological achievement, like a Steve Jobs. So all that kind of rolled into my writing, my academic background, my interest in literature, and also my life in technology.
And it all comes together in your books really beautifully, both in the themes and the characters that you pursue. So, as you
Yeah.
said, you started out with Medallion in
Yeah.
2014, and that introduced some of the characters that carry
Yeah.
forward into
Right.
additional books.
There was Sasha, the taxi cab driver, those people who've read it. And then there's Ben Schwartz, Lieutenant Ben Schwartz, in the Boston Police Homicide Division, and his colleague, who was Al Donatoli, who's a sergeant.
Right.
And they come through all of the books.
Right.
They're right there. I guess that makes it a series.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. The one book that jumps out at me that's not quite part of this series but is very interesting is Debris, a novel of love, war, and the Lusitania. And so you've turned the experience of the sinking of the Lusitania off the coast of Ireland into a novel.
Yeah, I became either obsessed or fascinated, it depends on your point of view, with the Lusitania. This is around 2014, 15. And I realized that's the 100th anniversary of the sinking.
Yes.
Other people have noticed it too, like Eric Larson wrote a block, whatever it's called, a very blockbuster book, which competed with mine. Believe me, mine didn't go as far as his, but his was not a narrative, nonfiction. Mine's fictional, and I became very interested in this family, the Lindsays in Boston. If you've ever been down to 15 Newbury Street, there's the Emmanuel Church.
Yes.
And kitty corner to the Emmanuel Church is a narrow chapel, a wedding chapel, and it was built by the Lindsay family, who were wealthy, for their daughter and son-in-law who died on the Lusitania.
Wow.
So I just became really interested in this, and overseas, there are people who still follow the story and do research on it, and one person is a fellow named Mitch Peake, who lives in Kent, England. I got in touch with him, and he reviewed my book, all the details. Oh yes, he's
Wonderful.
an expert. He said, if I may quote him, something
absolutely.
like, yeah, he said, reading this book is like getting a ticket to go on the Lusitania. That was quite
high praise.
It was high
Very
praise.
good.
Right,
Congratulations.
Yeah, right. So I just became very fascinated. And what I did is I created a character, a spy, a woman spy, who were one of the German spies on the docks of New York that recognized that the Lusitania, other ships, were taking munitions to the British Army in violation of a civilian ship. And the British government put those civilians at risk. Yes. And once the Germans found out about the munitions in the hold of the Lusitania, they were determined to make sure that the munitions wouldn't arrive, and they sunk the ship. Right. And that you were just talking about being off the coast.
I was just saying, I
right?
actually have visited the site off the coast of Kinsale, Ireland, and it is a very beautiful, beautiful site. And there are lovely monuments and tributes to those lives that were lost on the Lusitania, on the coastline at the site.
1,200 people died. 128 of them were Americans, which upset, of course, the American public terribly. It was one of the contributing factors for America to go to war.
Yes.
But in retrospect, the Germans were fighting the Brits, and the Brits were fighting the Germans, and they were going to use every resource available to win the war. So it was tragic. And the way my book found a publisher, that's another issue with if you don't self-publish, you look for a publisher. The major publishers usually won't take a book like this.
No.
Because they have to make a living. Agents have to make a living, and so far my books have not become that popular so that people become wealthy from them. So it's very hard to find a publisher, but the publisher I found for Debris was in South Carolina, and this is how I think I sent it out to 100 publishers.
Oh, wow.
Oh yes, you get a lot of rejection in this field. And one of the publishers, this publisher in South Carolina, at that time, if you remember, a Malaysian airliner was shot down.
Yes.
Right? It was shot down. And all the passengers were killed. And my new publisher turned to his wife at that moment and said, this is like the Lusitania. And my book arrived.
And there was your book,
And he says,
Kismet.
I'll take it. So there's a lot of hit and miss, a lot of miss in the hits, by the way, but a lot of it to find a publisher. And I've been very grateful. So far, I found 4 publishers, and with this last one in England.
Okay.
But so far, I've avoided self-publishing.
All right. Well, good for you.
Why
That's
not?
excellent. Right.
Nothing wrong with it, but I
But
avoid
if you
it.
can do it another
Yeah.
way, certainly. All right, let's focus now on Killer's App. And being the former English teacher,
Yeah.
the first thing that jumps out at me when I
Yeah.
look at the title is it's killers plural and not possessive. So speak
Right.
a little bit about the title, and then we'll get into the details
Well, I'm
of
glad
the
it
book.
intrigued you, because that's one of the things you do with the title, is you try to bring out the curiosity of the reader. What is that about? Well, the Killer App, we know, in fact, the epigraphs for this novel is one of the epigraphs, one of the lines is that Steve Jobs says, "What's the killer app? The cell phone." That's what, and he pretty much invented it. So
yeah,
it wasn't
right.
the first thing that he invented that changed the way we live. The killer app changes the way we live. You know, we can't imagine life without the cell phone. We can hardly imagine life without Facebook for a lot of us, right?
Right. I think
mean,
certainly maybe for the young
the
people,
young
right?
people,
But
or
even those of
TikTok.
us have been hooked.
Right. And those killer apps, the Killer's app is that this is a story, a murder story
Yes.
about a number of murders. And there are killers amidst them. So it just made sense to me that this would become Killer's app.
Right.
And there's a part in the story, late in the story, where the term is actually used.
Yes, yes.
I think you read it
Yes.
well.
Oh, yes.
And so it is actually used. But it was really just to be intriguing, because this is a murder story, right?
Yes. So it is a murder story, and it's on so many levels. And you have managed to carry through this book multiple threads and multiple sets of characters that then all do converge, like Agatha Christie in The Room. They all do converge at the end. You've got the high-tech guru in the character Gupta. You have the detectives you've already talked about from prior novels, Di Natale and Schwartz. I was intrigued by the professor, nickname, and Sarah among the other colorful homeless characters. And then the church volunteers who come down from Maine to Tremont Street. And as you already mentioned, the taxi drivers who managed to navigate the streets of Boston without getting killed, and with actually delivering their passengers fairly safely, which is a good thing. And interesting, you talk about South Station. You did work for or at the Federal Reserve.
I worked at the Federal Reserve for about 5 years. That was across from South Station.
Well, that's why that
and then
caught
I
my
moved
eye.
across to Fidelity Investments at 245 Summer. That too was next to
Also
it.
right across.
So I spent a lot of time South Station.
And that's South Station, because my husband for a while worked in the
Right.
Federal Reserve building, although
Yeah.
not
My
for the
first
Federal
reading
Reserve.
of the Medallion was at
Yes.
South Station.
Okay.
I told the people who managed South Station that I wrote a novel where South Station
It's
is
like the
very
main
large.
character.
And they says, well, we'll have a reading of with all those passengers coming back and forth, they put me in front of a podium, a lectern,
Right.
and I talked about my book.
Excellent.
Yeah,
right.
and then people ran to get to their train. It was
Yeah.
cute. It was very interesting.
Well, it does really come alive because it is a central point or place in the novel about the taxi drivers, the homeless people, even Gupta and the high-tech stuff, everybody going to the convention in the seaport. It really kind of focuses a lot of what happens.
I suppose you're right. I mean, it gives me a chance to bring a lot of people together.
Yes.
It's a central point, right?
Yes.
And what you don't want them, all these characters, like our lives, are dispersed, and then we find a way to bring them back together again. I think your point is well taken. To bring them all back together again suggests a theme of sorts.
Yes.
I agree. And you read it so well that you put in your notes to me something about a moral, M-O-R-A-L.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
right.
that was going to be kind of my last question, but let's move on to that.
yeah.
Sure. You know, you have basically a mystery thriller. You've got interesting characters. You've got the setting of Boston, South Station, the seaport, and other areas. But as it all comes together, do you in fact have a moral at the end of the story? Is there a message that the reader can walk away with?
Yes, but you know, you can't moralize.
No,
You cannot.
no.
You can't lecture, right? And
No.
you can't throw slogans or cliches at people. I mean, the second epigraph of the novel, you know, Steve Jobs says, "What's the killer app? It's cell phones." But there's a fellow, I can't remember his name right now. He's a inspirational speaker, who I quote him saying, "Love is the killer app." All right. Now, if I said that directly to you, you'd say, "Well, that's a cliche," because everyone believes in love and all that.
Right.
But in fact, there are a lot of people who are experiencing or presenting or missing love in the story.
Yes.
And
yes.
and so love becomes, I think, a major element in the story. But you know, it's not heavy-handed. It's there, right?
No, it's subtle.
It's subtle.
And I think you only kind of start to process it as you get towards the end.
Well, a lot of people have relationships in the story.
Yes.
Even the professor, who, by the way, is an alcoholic, living on the streets. He was once a teacher at Harvard. He had a tragic incident in his life, partly based upon his drinking, where he just left Harvard and he went back. He went to the streets, and he has a girlfriend named Sarah, who is the cat lady. She's based upon someone I used to see when I came through the comment on my way to work.
Okay.
Who was a street person, but she carried a cat with her, a calico cat. And I had never seen a cat on a leash. This woman had a cat because she was amidst crowds of people, and the cat could get away. So the cat was on a leash. So she came into the book. But they have a relationship. Natalie has a relationship with his wife, who is pregnant.
Yes.
Right. Schwartz and his wife Evie have, you know, there are relationships here.
Throughout.
It's how people work. And Amar Gupta is in love.
Yes.
Amar Gupta is in love with one of his junior employees, i.e., she's a younger woman. He's in his 40s. And I think he experiences love too. Now, here's a man driven by ambition, right? Driven to become another Elon Musk, right? In fact, he's trying to build an automobile that'll be as efficient as a gasoline engine automobile. And he thinks that'll be the killer app. But in the end, I think one of the things that intrigues him and makes his life worth living is that he loves this woman. And he discovers that part of the pathos or the tragedy of the story is he doesn't have the opportunity to completely realize that love.
No.
So there is that moral. But the other moral is based upon that church that you noticed.
Yes.
All right? On Tremont Street, across from the Park Street station, there's this, I don't really actually know the name of the church.
And I'm blanking myself
But it's right
on it.
there.
It's a very pretty
Portico.
Greek,
Yes. Doric columns. Right?
with the chambered nautilus
Right.
symbol in the center.
And I went by it for years, and I appropriated it for my own purposes. That first of all, they do encourage the homeless to come.
Yes.
They have services and all that. And what I suggested is that these people come for cookies and tea and cider and all kinds of things, and nourishment, because they don't have much to eat on the streets, or they don't have homes like we have them, or refrigerators like we have them. They get what they can get. But at the same time, that is the church that comes down to do this outreach is called the Redemption Church. So without being too heavy-handed, I think my book is about redemption.
Oh, I think so too.
You know,
yes.
it's about people, and it does have instances in the book, particularly toward the end, where people find their own salvation or redemption. Because I think it's a very serious theme. Among the homeless, who are mostly addicted by one
alcohol,
or
drugs,
drugs or whatever it is that it's as one of my characters says, it's a slow suicide.
Yes.
You know, it's a deprivation of everything you need to be a viable human being, and they're fritting it away on the streets, and so it is a kind of slow negation of life, and there are a couple opportunities where people can turn this around,
and some of them do.
And some of them do, and I as someone who was invited to open AA meetings, and I became fascinated by their attempts to bring people toward their own redemption, their own salvation,
Right.
their own sobriety. And I remember they're talking about a higher power.
Yes.
That it's beyond our power to solve this. We have to trust in a higher power, which is, it's very religious. But the idea of a higher power fits into my theme of one of the killers, who doesn't believe in any higher power, the serial killer, but he does believe in power.
Oh, absolutely. And that comes through subtly at first and then really overtly as the story develops.
And I think in terms of politics or political movements like fascism, they worship power. And but that's what the police are about, and the law is about, is to keep those things from emerging and from controlling our lives, from ending our lives.
Right.
So I think, in terms of the serious themes, love, redemption, and that I would say those are the important ones. Yeah.
Let's go back for a minute to Gupta. And when you talk about love and invention and power, would you say that he is in love with his invention of his car and what kind of power that represents for him? And then, of course, without giving away the plot, what happens as a result?
Yeah, and it's an admission, halfway through the book or three-quarters of the way through the book, he has a confidant, a woman who used to work with him, that is Gupta, named Ida, who left that life to move out to Colorado and raise her 2 kids. And he calls her once in a while because she's the truth teller. She can always, he can always count on her to tell him the truth. He's such a powerful guy. But he's what is he searching for?
Right.
It must be quite an experience to stand up in front of, to be mic'd up and be standing on the stage in front of 3,000 adoring technologists and who are waiting on every word he wants to say and who are waiting for him to tell them what the new best thing will be, the new killer app will be. And there must be a lot of vanity and narcissism or egotism based upon that kind of response. So you are getting a lot of love from, we find that with performers. They get a lot of love from audiences of thousands of people, right?
Right.
But in terms of a personal love, a love where one is known for one's complete self and not the persona that you present on a stage, that's different.
It's very different,
That's different. And I think if I understand the character correctly, Gupta, who is on the cover of magazines, right? Imagine being on the cover of many magazines and called, I guess, People magazine call him the sexiest guy or something like that.
Right.
So you get that. But there is this personal thing where you are connected with one human being out of your full humanity. Nothing's hidden, nothing's held back, and the two people find that and call that love. And he's missing that.
He is,
Yeah,
and
he's
in
missing
some ways, you
Yeah.
wonder, is he searching for that through his inventions and through his exercise of power or whatever? I don't
Yeah.
want to go too deep into these characters, but
no, and we don't want to get too sentimental. But Orson Welles was a genius, an actor, director, writer in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But he did this wonderful movie called Citizen Kane.
yes,
All right, and if you haven't ever seen it, I suggest that you take a look at this movie. But the very famous ending of Citizen Kane, after everything that Kane goes through to get success and power and whatever he goes through, on his deathbed, he says this word that nobody really can understand. He says rosebud. It's a very famous line,
Yes.
rosebud. And what we learn in the movie is that was a sled that he used to use, and it's associated with his childhood. and the acceptance he had from his parents. That is it true that everything he did in his life added up to the search for Rosebud?
Right.
That intriguing ending, well, it is intriguing, and that's the point. It's to
Right.
make us think about it. Is that what life's about? Rosebud? Maybe.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about your inspiration for characters. You revealed to me earlier
Yeah.
that your inspiration for the two police officers was real-life Boston police officers.
Well, certainly one of them.
Okay.
Schwartz was my own imaginative character, but the other one is DeNatale. DeNatale is based upon a police officer in Boston named John Moynihan. And Moynihan in 2015 was shot. They stopped a felon, and it was a car chase. They stopped this felon, and Moynihan got out of the car to make the arrest. The felon got out of the car and shot Moynihan in the face. And a lot of people thought that, in fact, his colleagues thought, fellow police officer, he thought he was dead. But it turns out that the bullet went under his right eye and then lodged behind his right ear, and which was a miracle of sorts.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. And I think he got to the White House. Certainly
He did. I remember the incident
Yeah.
vividly, on the news.
The Patriots had a
was
game
he going to survive?
where they brought him up to the mic. So everybody was just enthralled that he lived. And I think DeNatale too was shot. At the end of this book, Empty Doorways, DeNatale is shot. And I leave that ending open, that we don't know if he survives or not, because in this book he does survive.
And it's his coming back
And he's
onto the
coming
job.
back after months of rehab and surgeries. He was a very handsome guy, and now part of his face has been disfigured. His wife is pregnant. He's got a lot of challenges. As he comes back, he's not sure if he can face up and meet the requirements of being a good police officer again. So he has that internal difficulty, that challenge, but they both have crimes to solve, and they throw themselves into the solution.
Right. I found the street people very interesting because they were very unique characters. You didn't just generalize, homeless people. You gave each of these people real lives and real, incentive and motivation and backgrounds. I found it very interesting that the professor always met his little group at the Edgar Allan Poe statue near Park Square, near Boston Common in downtown Boston, given that Poe himself was such an addict and died so young as a result.
There are many reasons why Poe would be a part of this book. Certainly, the professor brings them. By the way, if you ever have a chance, it's at the corner of Charles and Boylston.
Yes.
And it shows Poe returning to Boston. He has a walking stick. I don't know what the dog is there, but he does have the raven.
Yes.
Poe's most famous poem is The Raven, and the raven is on his shoulder. So, but they congregate there because the professor, I guess you could take the professor out of teaching, but you can't take teaching out of the professor.
Right.
Professor's the professor. And so he gives his fellow alcoholics nips, these little bottles and snacks, and they sit there and he lectures or he talks about Shakespeare and Melville, and he's a professor, so he talks about all these things, right? And they listen dutifully, partly because they get drinks, but partly because they formed a family. That's what happens in life. People form families. They're so essential to human life that even the homeless become
people
families.
Form their own family. Yes.
So I walked by that statue a lot. I was downtown a lot, and there's another reason that Poe would be important is that Poe invented the detective story.
Yes.
In 1841, he wrote this story called "Murders on the Rue Morgue," and it shows a civilian helping the police solve difficult crimes, and the civilian amateur detective has a friend who narrates the whole story from his point of view. So Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, the inept or police officers, that was all there in 1841 when Poe. So Poe was a genius.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, incredibly, we're out of time.
Oh, okay.
As I told you at the beginning,
Yeah.
it's going to go by very quickly. Thank you so much. I encourage everyone to get a hold of Killer's app. We've only scratched the surface of the characters and the themes and the
thank
Boston
you.
setting, which is wonderful. People will recognize so much in this book. Thank you very much.
Well, thank
and
you.
We're looking forward to your next publication, whatever that may
Well,
be.
I think I'm starting something.
Okay, good. We're ready. As
Thank
soon as
you.
you finish, come on back.
Thank you so much.
All right, I'm Anne Marie Mahoney, your host of Belmont Author Spotlight. Thank you, Len Abram, for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.